Hello, everybody. Here I'm back a little bit doing all these vlogs because, well, it's a little bit of a kind of, uh, well, it's a hobby, but it's also a little bit of a therapy of mine to, express my own thoughts and all this stuff. And well, I gotta admit that before I go with, with my talk about the movie, there's a few disclaimers that I do want to talk about. And because it's something that has been eating me during the last couple of days, and I will have, don't worry, I'll try to make it as quick as possible, and as also as friendly as possible. But here goes. One of the things that kind of eat me a little bit is that I was actually pondering if I was a little bit too harsh on the Unbreakable Boy, even though a lot of my how can I say, my opinion stands, but maybe my approach was a little bit too harsh into it. But don't get me wrong, the movie is bad for what it is, but but maybe my expression, I don't know. Probably you tell me if I was harsh or not. But okay. Actually, don't tell me because that will leave for myself. But don't worry, I'll be eager to learn a little bit too much about the whole thing. I'm open to that, but I still think that it wasn't. It was pretty bad. The movie was pretty bad. Bad. This is why, in ways, I kind of. This is why even at the video, I kind of encourage people to watch the movie so we can make it kind of like a discussion to where it works and where it doesn't. See, that's the beauty of bad movies or of bad execution of that. And the second disclaimer that I want to make is that because of a lot of personal issues and personal stuff that has been happening, that it is even affecting a little bit of my health. This is the reason why this year I decided to skip doing the usual Oscars thoughts and reaction. You remember that every year I always say that I had the guilty pleasure of watching the Oscars and then make a vlog out of it, kind of giving my own thoughts about it. Well, I think that it was kind of like a bad timing that my that some personal issues was getting a little bit out of hand, that it affected me a little bit too much on my anxiety level, to the point that I think that I should not, how can I say, feel the fire of my emotions, and let it just let it be. But but that doesn't mean that I didn't watch it. I did watch it, and well, I do have kind of like my own thoughts, but I will put, but right here, right now, I will tell you, in simple terms, what do I thought about it. Personally, I thought it was boring. It was boring, and leaving aside, all the things that has been, talk about it. I will just talk about, the show itself. That I thought it was boring, and not much of things interesting happens. They try some stuff, but some not a lot of the things work. Although there were some few things that it actually gave me a little bit of a giggle. I do admit that seeing Conan O'Brien coming out of Demi Moore's body was kind of like, it was one of the few times that it gave me a giggle. And the memoriam segment, while I do agree that it was an improvement compared to last year's, because at least they have a better camera focus, and they have a better choice of music. I understand that there are some snubs, but I also understand that sometimes in an artistic level, some cuts has to be done, and I'm trying to see the both sides of the coin, but anything. But I do agree one thing is that I think that the Oscars, if they want to catch a little bit the attention of some people, something had to be something has to be changed, mostly kind of like in the format, the presentation, and well, I'm beginning to realize that it's getting a little bit too monotone. I'm almost feeling like the pacing, the way it goes, and all these things are feeling a little bit kind of like this. It's kind of like the same old, same old. So this is kind of like the tough cookie to crack. And as for the winners, and yes, there's some that I agree, some I disagree. There's some movies that I haven't seen, so I have almost no opinion about it. Actually, there's only one movie that I have a big opinion out of it. Congratulations, Flo. You really deserve your best animated picture. God, this poor cat. I'm so happy that this cat won the award because, well, I did I even thought it wasn't kind of like my one of my high top 10 best movie of the year. It was there, of course. You saw my video. It wasn't my Flo was number 5, and I thought that Wild Robot was better because of a bit of my Chris Sanders preference. I'm so happy. This poor cat deserved that love. I'm so happy that Flo won. Speaking of animals, now let's jump into the movie that I saw. And boy, that after all these moments of stress that I was having and mostly feeling, I really kind of needed one of those movies that instead of me just going just for the sake of going, I just wanted to have something fun, and no better way than to watch a movie that it caught my attention, and at the same time, because it's animated, I just wanted to watch it. And that movie is none other than Night of the Zoopocalypse. Oh, just in case, I am aware that the biggest movie that is showing this week is Mickey 17. And I do want to watch that movie. It's just that I think that I took a little bit more priority on Night of the Zoopocalypse, mostly for the fact that it is animated. I do have kind of like a slight preference on that over sci-fi. And well, there's also the fact that this is a movie that it prides itself on saying that it is based on one of Clive Barker's stories. And I've been hearing a lot of people, saying that this is a movie produced by Clive Barker. If you know him, I don't remember if he's a filmographer or he's a writer. He wrote all these horror stories, and some of them escapes from my head. But he did wrote a short story called, I think it was called Zoombies, which is basically zombies, but with animals from the zoo. And and there is a little bit of a misconception in this movie, saying that Clive Barker produced this film. And while I do see that at least on the Wikipedia, that Clive Barker is the executive producer of this film. The funny thing is that I don't see Clive Barker's name almost anywhere else. A lot of those I seen sources saying I've seen the producer's name and all this stuff, and none of them is Clive Barker. The only thing that is reliable, the reliable source, which is the movie itself. I watched the credits, and the only part in which it says Clive Barker is just as the story is based upon. So far, I am a little bit skeptical that Clive Barker is a producer of this movie, but it's mostly out of how can I say, some unreliable sources of information that kind of puts me in my head scratching. Maybe if I look somewhere else, I might find proof that he really was part of that movie, because I don't think that he could be kind of like a part of a movie like that. And maybe I'm wrong, but we'll see about it. But either way, I mean, horror with of course, a story about wolves, tiger, monkeys, all the zoo animals. It was just kind of like an instant win for me. It's too bad that my movie theater was they didn't show the movie. I had to go to New York for that. And well, I was, during all these stressful moments, I was kind of like in the dumps. I needed at least something silly. Even the trailer looked kind of like silly. And if memory serves me right, this movie is a co-production from Canada and some of the United States and France. It's so you can tell that there's some people that wanted to put some vision into it. So right in the get-go, I decided to watch it. I was in the dumps, and you know what? I will say that this is kind of what I was needing, especially during those stressful times. It's not exactly a perfect movie, but it brought me kind of like a big smile on my face. It's actually better than what people might think for what it is. And the best way I can describe it is that I was watching Fox Kids motion picture from that channel from the 90s, Fox Kids. And you saw all these bumpers. Imagine if they made kind of like a movie out of one of those bumpers. I do remember like the fox, the literal fox from those Fox Kids bumpers. That's what I'm saying. Most kind of like the kind of humor that it does, and a little bit the character designs that brought me into this. And well, I just came out really liking it. I may be a little bit too generous on this movie, but this is. But if you're kind of like in a happy mood, this is the kind of movie that you're gonna get. And well, it can get a little bit scary, but in the scary level, since this is basically kind of like a horror movie. It's just kind of more like a 4 out of 10 in the scale of scariness. So it is safe for younger audiences who are who they're getting ready for the more hardcore stuff. But I will say more about it when I explain it. So the premise of the movie centers around this zoo, and we got the main protagonist who is this wolf named Gracie. She's played by Gabby Cosmatis. And well, she's a wolf. She likes her pack, but she's kind of like full of herself because she thinks that nothing is gonna happen because they're in the zoo. She doesn't need too much to prepare, and she thinks that she has all the right ideas. And well, things are nice into the zoo until one night a meteor falls from space, but it disintegrated just like Homer Simpson predicted, and of course the meteor disintegrates into the size of a peanut, in which it falls into peanut. Then a rabbit eats it, and it turns into it becomes a mutation. It becomes kind of like a mutation. It even cocoons itself like an alien, and from that it becomes kind of like a zombie. That the skin is kind of like very thick, almost like a gummy bear texture, but a little bit more grosser and hideous and all that stuff. And well, it spreads. Once you get bitten by the teeth and probably also exposed to their goo or saliva that they sprout, well, it spreads to the other animal, who then turns into zombies, and chaos happens. And of course, our protagonist Gracie had technically had kind of like a run-in, unfortunate run-in with the newest animal of the zoo, which is this mountain lion named Dan, who was played by David Harbour. And of course, long story short, some survivor animals, they are stuck together in this horrible situation. They must find a way, uh, to patch their differences in order to survive. Well, the zombie apocalypse that is happening on the outside the zoo. It's also a little bit kind of lucky because imagine what will have happened if these animals escape to the outside world and humans become. You know what? I'm beginning to think that this almost turns into a family friendly version of The Walking Dead. I can imagine that. A lot of things come into your head when you overanalyze or kind of your imagination flies about what kind of scenarios you can think of that this movie could have. And yeah, it has the basic plot, basic plot that you're gonna get. Some things are kind of a little bit predictable, in which there's some aspect that I will get to that because that is something that is even an element on this movie. But at the end of the day, it did say that if you do the execution right, you're gonna find some enjoyment out of this movie, and that's what it does. It can. There's some moments about horror, but at the same time, it acknowledges it's a cartoon and takes time to be likable, enjoyable. Some jokes land, some jokes don't. But I think it has kind of like a 75% ratio, and this is where I also go a little bit with the characters. Let's talk about the protagonists, of course, Gracie and Dan, which of course the wolf and the wolf and the mountain lion, which these are kind of like the character who take most of the spotlight. It's basically their story, and I will say that if there's one of the golden things that I appreciate about this movie is their relationship. Now, even in my head, I could ship them, even though it could come into weird situations, and it's mostly because these two characters have great chemistry, and both are kind of like they're opposing. Gracie is basically the totally main protagonist. She's the character that she likes her pack, even though she's a little bit rebellious. She's kind of like she always wants to depend and trust on others, even though she kind of thinks that she is almost always right. Almost right. She has her flaws, but she also kind of she's kind of like more likable. While Dan, the mountain lion, on the other hand, he just wants to escape. He is kind of a little bit reserved. He's the kind of guy who say that every man for himself. But you can tell that he's gruff, but it's mostly because he's more experienced into the wild. He just knows kind of like the laws of nature, and sometimes well, he's kind of like the animal who knows that the world is a dog eat dog world, and while he does have kind of like a soft spot, he's a little bit reluctant. And little by little, the movie build up on these two characters arguing, and then kind of have this unlikely friendship that, for me, their arguments it is kind of like the best foundation of the movie. Yeah, I wouldn't mind that there could be more story of these two. Kind of being two sides of the same coin. And of course, yeah, David Harbour has a cool voice with it that makes it also great. I really like it. But of course, there's also the other cast, which honestly, there is a little bit of a mix. I got a little bit of kind of like a mixed feelings of these characters because, well, I don't technically, go overboard because this is basically it's what it happened in horror movies. Horror movies always kind of have these kind of characters that feel like they're sidelining. They're kind of like a bit of, sometimes you might roll their eyes because it was like, what is their purpose? Or the movie sometimes comes to a halt because we concentrate on them and it doesn't feel like the plot is basically moving forward. And it's understandable for some of them, of course. Let's just start it. I feel there are a few positives that I can give to some of that. Like, for example, there is this some of the characters I forget the name. Let's start. There is this lemur. This lemur, he is really obsessed on TV that he basically knows he got a little bit more knowledge than the other animals about the things that are going on, and he basically kind of becomes the most meta of all the characters because he watched a lot of those horror movies and he basically knows how things goes on. And this is basically a little bit more of his shtick that he kind of predicts about things that are going on. And I know that it's kind of like a wink, not wink, wink, and this kind of becomes a little bit of a double standard. No, not double standard. A double-edged sword that it's gonna make you feel like, oh my gosh, guy, don't say the plot. We know, and all this stuff. And it in a way, it doesn't. It kind of feels like kind of like a cheap way to. To make the movie feel a little bit too self-aware for what it is. And there's some times in which the movie shows its cleverness that is self-aware, except that when he basically just says it out loud. Although he doesn't it's not irritating because there's some times in which at least having this knowledge, he showcases that the guy can be useful. There's another character. There's this ostrich who is more kind of like the sarcastic guy. For the most part, you see him kind of like complain, I think he's a little bit one of the weakest characters, considering that his biggest moments showcases mostly in the third act, and so he's a little bit undercooked. Not as undercooked a little bit with the capybara. The capybara is basically kind of like the Latina character. I say this because she has the Latina accent. And I tried to struggle a little bit what was kind of like her purpose, but you know what, horror movies kind of have kind of like this tendency of saying that, okay, we got another girl who's also kind of like the problem and all this stuff. Although she's kind of also kind of a little bit kind of like one of the few reasonable characters for a certain extent. All of them kind of always kind of become kind of like part of the joke. But there is also the character who, you know that in every horror movie, there's always the asshole. And the asshole is this monkey, this long-nosed monkey that, you know, all these characters, you know that almost in these kind of horror movies, especially on zombie movies, there is this kind of like this asshole who is even more selfish than, well, the hardcore character, because it's basically the character who feels like he was basically, I'm so smart because I'm the new evolution of the monkey, of the humans and all this stuff. But the more he brags, the more then he showcases that he's dumb. He's really, really dumb, and he's a very selfish character. And well, the movie actually knows that he's basically kind of like the second antagonist of the movie, and well, even the lemur kind of predicts that there's always one who's gonna be betrayed. And honestly, he gets half of his comeuppance because let me tell you, at least I know that I feel like I'm gonna spoil, but let's say that this guy didn't get punished enough, and he didn't pay too much for some of the stuff that goes. And oh dear, this is gonna be a little bit hard for me. The movie also feels like it needed technically the child, and it is with this pygmy hippopotamus named Put. And I'm sorry to say this, but this hippo was a little bit insufferable. Things were good, but once this hippo comes out, I don't know if it's a she or I think it's a she. because of the voice. This hippo is basically going around, always kind of being smiling, fearing, and it has kind of like this overly cutesy voice, like I'm good, I can do anything, all this stuff. And she basically follows our main leads, Gracie and Dan, and almost a little bit unaware that there is a zombie apocalypse surrounding it. And for the most part, she can be very, very irritating and in a ways intrusive. I mean, some people complained that the movie had kind of like this uneven tone, and I didn't find it even in the most humorous way. But this hippo is basically mostly the proof of it, that in which of course the mountain lion even call it a dead weight, and it kind of is. And then the movie kind of feels like it forces itself to have this character become useful, and part of the solution. But maybe if they can remove the hippo and give all the usefulness to the other characters, then maybe that could have helped it a little bit more. So if there's a weak spot about this movie, is that hippo. It went a little bit intrusive. So inclusive, I can say that there was even kind of like a good moment in between Gracie and Dan, but then the hippo technically interrupted, like saying, "Hey, what is that? Hey, what do you mean by that?" And I'm serious. Seriously, these kind of characters, sometimes they have to be handled a little bit better in order to find kind of like a middle ground of it. And like I said, anyway, I said many times that I almost never want to talk about when animation is good, when it's obvious that they're made by professionals. But this one actually deserves to be recognized on the, first of all, like I mentioned, I love the character designs. The character designs are kind of like Fox Kids characters. But one of the extra layers that make this animated film beautiful is that it kind of has this artistic style in which during the horror section, and mostly almost during all the movie, in which takes place during nighttime, they wanted to amplify the cheesy horror vibe and atmosphere by having a lot of neon lighting, and with purple and bright and kind of like neon blues lighting, that it kind of gives this this cheesy sci-fi atmosphere. Sometimes horror kind of do that to make it look kind of like this artistic. And something that comes into my mind is some episodes of Tales from the Crypt, or there's this segment on the Twilight Zone movie in which the cartoon character it's kind of like a retelling of the kid who he can do anything, and well, if you notice kind of like the lighting, you feel like it feels comic-y, and those aspects kind of work. Even the zombie effects that the zombies, they have kind of like creepy but very also interesting design. They don't commit too much, on staying on that they have to stay like animal or so. No, they can even break some of the rules. Like for example, when the chickens become zombies, they don't stay just like chickens. They can even have kind of like the top of their skull, or they can be removable and kind of look like a Canadian in South Park, and give it some sharp teeth. And of course the zombies also look very bright, and the best way I can describe it is either they look a little bit gummy bearish or like a gummy bear, but then I kind of remember that they kind of look like the zombies from Yokai Watch 3. It's a video game from the very obscure. Yeah, but if you see them, you'll get you'll get the idea. Some of them are actually kind of like creepier than others, but still, maintaining kind of like their sense of humor. This is where I will talk a little bit, the style of in which, yeah, this has kind of like the style of humor that it got. I liked kind of like the theme that, well, of course, that during this situation, things we can work together, but at the same time, we get the heart of the movie. Like I said, is basically the story of finding a middle ground in order to find an understanding especially between Gracie and Dan, in which Gracie must learn that she's not always right. Her peck mentality. She always needs to be ready, even when things doesn't happen. It's something like her grandmother even warned her that even though they live in a zoo, they even still have to maintain their instincts, and even with that, she's not always right on when it calls the shot. She doesn't have all the answers, and of course, on the other hand, Dan should be a little bit more trustful, and even though he's very cautious and tries to make survive, he has to survive some things. There's also the support of others, it's also fine, to give them a helping hand. In which, of course, this is actually a little bit spread, with the animals and all that. Oh yeah, there's also a little bit of a musical jingle that that I actually like it. I think I'm gonna keep it on my head. But at the end of the day, this is a movie that, if you have a certain appreciation to zombie movies or other sci-fi films, like most notably Body Snatchers, how can I say, Body Snatchers, with a little bit of Dawn of the Dead, because instead of a zoo, they said a mall, and there is also a little bit of Mars Attack. I'll say there's a little bit of Mars Attack, so I really enjoy this movie, and despite its flaws, I can give it a high recommendation, just for the sake that it has enough good elements to give you a good time. Isn't that right, Spencer? What do you say, Spencer? You like this? Ah! Ah! Ah!